When you look at insane conspiracy theories like QAnon seeping into the mainstream of the Republican Party, what that tells you is that there are no more guardrails within that media ecosystem. And I think one of the biggest challenges is how do we reestablish some baselines of truth that at least the vast majority of people can agree to.
Former President Barack Obama asking a question that we will be dealing with way beyond Trump's time in office: how to reestablish baselines for truth. Baselines Obama's successor has obliterated. New York Times writes this, quote, urged on by the president, whose espousal of conspiracy theories has only intensified in the waning weeks of his campaign, QAnon adherents are pushing such ideas into the conservative mainstream, alongside more traditional issues like low taxes and limited government. People feel left out, says one young Republican leader from a small town in Georgia. QAnon, with its focus on criminal elites, helped them understand why. It's not about what we're doing wrong, it's the swamp, he told the Times. Joining us now, former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, MSNBC National Security Analyst, our friend Frank Figliuzzi. Carol Lee is also here. This feels like disinformation mixed with the grievance voter, mixed with this dangerous moment of groups that appear to embrace and celebrate vigilantism. What piece of this is this QAnon merging with the actual brand of the Republican Party? Frank, sorry.
If that's for me, Nicole, here's what's happening, and we're seeing this play out. We're seeing this play out before our eyes. There's the merger of the actual Trump campaign strategy with what has quickly become a full-blown cult. So it's not just kind of a parallel association. We're actually seeing the Trump campaign play to that demographic. I mean, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the strategy conference room where they decide they've got to go after and lock down people who believe that the world is led by flesh-eating pedophiles. That must be astounding. So that's where we are. And let me point to one example of that. Last Thursday in the town hall meeting with Trump talking to Savannah Guthrie, she asked him about QAnon. He says, I don't know anything about it, but I do know that they're against pedophilia. And lo and behold, what happens soon thereafter? We have allegations that child porn has been found in what is claimed to be Hunter Biden's laptop. And what do we see on social media? The QAnon folks loving this, just thinking this is a fulfilled prophecy. Just like back in July 2016, when President Trump at a press conference said, Russia, if you're listening, really, I hope you find those emails. We're seeing his kind of prophetic utterances play out in a kind of strategy that's becoming reality for people.
I have never heard all of those seemingly disconnected events of the last 72 hours tied together. Frank, let me just follow up and ask you, it would seem that law enforcement only gets involved when there's an intersection with a crime or a potential crime. Who's in charge of pushing back on sort of pre-criminal crazy activity? Is that civil society? Is it our leaders? Whose responsibility is that?
We all play a role in that. And boy, it's certainly the intelligence and law enforcement communities and the social media platforms. Let's not forget that Facebook and YouTube have now pledged to keep taking down the QAnon-related sites and posts because it is falsehood. It is dangerous falsehood. But you're right. There's a gap in the law here. And there's a gap for a reason. There's privacy and freedom of thought. Of course, we have to preserve that. But there's a dangerous gap because if these people start moving toward violence, law enforcement's not there to proactively catch it and get out in front of it. It's a real issue. And, you know, President Obama, in the clip you played, he talked about almost a kind of deprogramming that's going to have to occur that you see with cult members. And some of that is simply reminding people that they are capable of independent thought. They can think for themselves. And taking down their sites and posts from Facebook and YouTube actually helps them to maybe take a breath and say, I actually can have independent thought here. The other is to show them their reality is wrong, that if Biden, in fact, and Senator Harris win, they're not monsters communists or socialists, they might actually have a better plan for healthcare and the economy. So we have to watch where this is going. But don't forget, there's 24 people running for Congress that in some way, shape, or form adhere to or support QAnon theory. So this doesn't go away merely if Trump goes away.
Well, and Trump has been an unbridled cheerleader. He's been asked in the press briefing room, I think by Jill Colvin of the AP, about an individual QAnon candidate, Carol Lee. He was asked, I want to play that moment that Frank talked about, because he was asked in front of a large, but not quite as large as Joe Biden's audience that night, a large television audience, about QAnon. And here's what he said.
Now, can you just once and for all state that that is completely not true and that disavow QAnon in its entirety?
I know nothing about QAnon.
I just told you.
I know very little. You told me, but what you tell me doesn't necessarily make it fact. I hate to say that. I know nothing about it. I do know they are very much against pedophilia. They fight it very hard, but I know nothing about it.
They believe it is a satanic cult run by the deep
study
state.
The subject. I'll tell you what I do know about. I know about Antifa, and I know about the radical left.
I mean, it is the hallmark of a cult member to say, you can present me with facts, but how do I know that your facts are real facts and not just your facts? I mean, what is the White House's sort of answer for responses like that from the country's commander-in-chief?
I mean, there are people around the president who just want to put the blinders on and not act like that's not happening. And, you know, you can't, because what the president also said, Nicolle, as you know, to Savannah in that interview, was he dismissed his FBI director, and while also not dismissing QAnon. His FBI director, who said that the groups like this are domestic terror threats. And so, you know, he's essentially saying he doesn't know about something that could be a potential terror threat, and he won't denounce a group that has these really just conspiracy theory crazy views. And we've seen them do this before. And the only reason that people deduce from this, or the president would do this, is because he doesn't want to alienate people who support him, regardless of where they come from. That's what the president's critics will say. But he's been given multiple opportunities to denounce this group, and he hasn't. And when he was asked about the candidate in Georgia who won, he said he supported her, and he tweeted out that she was a rising Republican star.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.